Inkwell, how are we doing?
Woo.
The Whispering Angels, shout out to Whispering Angel, by the way, for sponsoring the toast, is flowing. Sounds like the conversations are happening, but we're about to talk about some money.
Okay.
All right? So I'm excited for this panel to talk about culture as a superpower, and you heard me talk about it during the toast. So excited to have on stage with me, and I'm going to do a quick introduction of our guests here. Let me take a seat. So with me on stage is Danielle Speichner. Danielle is the head of inclusive marketing of Kraft Heinz. We have Ryan Forth, my man.
Yo.
We go way back. President and Chief Creative Officer of Cashmere Agency, which is a cultural fluency agency amongst a lot of other things.
Yes, sir.
And of course, we have the legend, Mr. Greg Edwards, President and CEO of Uniworld Group, Inc., who is one of the largest multicultural agencies that existed, and one of the first, actually. Awesome. So, I have a theory. Again, I said it, up and down the beach, there's lots of conversations about AI, about supply path. We're still talking about the death of this cookie. I don't know where it's dying. And if there was as much conversation about culture, the thing that actually motivates human beings to buy, the thing that's driving all this chatter right now while I'm talking on this stage, there would be more growth in this industry than I think any of us could imagine, because it has been proven that culture is the thing that drives our decision making more than anything. I am in a linen shirt and in these pants. You will never see me in this in Brooklyn, but it is the culture of Cannes to wear this, and that's why I'm wearing it, and that's the power of influence. So let's jump into it. And I'll put this first question out, and anyone can answer it. What is the purpose of cultural engagement, and why is it so crucial in today's marketing landscape? And anyone can take it.
I'll get in there. I think
And talk a little bit about what you do before you answer that question.
Yeah. I'm Ryan. I'm the President and Chief Creative Officer at Cashmere Agency, located in Los Angeles. I've been there many moons now, maybe 16 years. Always helping brands and studios and streamers navigate the power of culture. And the reason that that's so important, especially now, right, is because we talked so long about technological innovation and how important that was, whether it's from a streamer or AI technology or your cars that drive themselves or the Internet of Things. But all of that is table stakes right now. What you're looking for as an audience, as the culture, what we're looking for is cultural innovation. So it's not about the technology that allows the newest season of Bridgerton to be on Netflix. It's about the newest season of Bridgerton and the types of depictions of us that we're seeing there, right? I think the other thing is how to drive culture conversation in an earned fashion. You can spend, but like you said, it's harder these days and less efficient because of the death of the cookie, because of the rise of social, because of being able to opt out, because of being able to pay a little bit more and not seeing any commercials. So in that case, then the culture conversation around an initiative, around a product, around a new movie becomes massively important. And I think that's why everybody's talking about culture, one of the reasons.
Absolutely. Danielle, with your new role, how are you ensuring that culture is a part of the Kraft Heinz strategy as you go into the market?
Yeah. So I'm lucky enough to come into a role where culture and moving at the speed of culture is inherent to what we do at Kraft Heinz. And I've had experience in my career working with brands that believe in that culture, the influence of culture and how important it is. I think what is important for us here when I think about the opportunity that is in front of Kraft Heinz, it's really taking these iconic brands that already have a place in culture and understanding how that is translated into the culture and the cultures of the growth audiences we want to serve. And so it's really important to understand that what our brand means to us might mean something different to the people out into the world, and how do we embrace that? I mean, we were already invited to the cookout. It's just how do we act like we've been there before?
And if you could just double click on that, with so much focus on efficiency and technology, you are probably working across a group of brand managers who are thinking about probably their KPI more than they're thinking about, okay, how do I actually build this connection? And that's the importance of your role, right? So how do you navigate those dynamics as being internal to the brand to help them understand that 1 + 1 = 3, and that it's not either or, but it's actually both of them working together?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think it starts with redefining the KPIs, right? Understanding that the KPIs for brand success are not just rooted in what we've traditionally measured, but cultural influence and engagement are at the core of driving what success looks like in the future and being able to tap into that. I also think putting in frameworks to be able to predict how to engage in culture is going to be really important. And so doing that allows for a level of comfortability with brand managers to be able to carve out resources to be able to support those things, but also do that knowing that we have a plan in place and we know we're in the push and pull because we've already planned for it.
Yeah, exactly. It's sort of, you can plan for the expected, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
As much as I talk about sort of AI, and I poke a little fun of it because I think AI wrote all the tracks here. That's why there's so much AI panels, right? I think AI made that decision. It is an incredible opportunity to understand culture in a very different way. And I know, Greg, there's a lot of work that you all are doing at your agency to look at AI, to look at technology as part of the work you do as you're educating brands. So would love for you to touch a little bit on that work and how that is translating for the brands that you are responsible for in the marketplace.
So first, I want to say good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Greg Edwards, President and CEO of Uniworld Group, and a couple of touch points are really important. We are the longest-standing multicultural agency in America, and ironically, we actually are probably the longest-standing multicultural agency in the world. So the biggest thing that we're faced with, Byron and Monique have put together something that it will transcend time, right? 55 years this year, so 55 years of doing something that's different. Now this thing called AI comes along, right? And the challenge that we have with AI is it doesn't see any of us. It only sees this continual need to feed itself, right? And what that does is it excludes us. So we were marginalized long before, and now there's a piece of technology to marginalize us even more. So what we've been doing is really putting context of culture into AI and making sure that what's driven from an insight is also delivered in investment. So helping our clients think a lot differently about not only the efficiency, because that's the deal, right? We all have these efficiency conversations, but the conversation of effectiveness, right? And redefining the measures, because one of the challenges become to be more efficient, I should spend less money. The reality is these audiences require more money because they're underdeveloped. And because of that, technology would make us efficient without first recognizing us. So the challenge is to first make sure these audiences are seen correctly, valued properly, and then executed against completely.
Yeah. And it's funny because you talk about efficiency, the brands that are actually doing it right, they're not looking at efficiency as a CPM. They're actually looking at efficiency as what's my ROI on the back end?
Oh, yeah.
Because you might spend a little bit more, as you said, to develop that audience, but the returns that you have are incredible. And bringing it back to the panel that just happened before, when we looked at, we had a higher CPM with our solution 365 Black Excellence when we first partnered with NBC. But when we ran all the studies, what it showed is that it was driving more effectiveness when you looked at consideration, purchase intent, even ad recall was way higher, double-digit growth. And so the effectiveness was really the back-end effectiveness, not the front-end effectiveness. And that's the piece that I think that we have to continue to educate the marketplace and help brands and brand managers tell that story so that we can sort of move in the direction that we want.
I'd just add, I think my background is coming in media spaces primarily, and it's always been important when we think about culture and cultivating audiences that have not engaged. You have not engaged with it as a brand, that you have to make deposits. You can't walk into a bank and withdraw from an account that is empty. And so you have to make deposits in the culture in order to get that ROI back. And so cultural engagement is just as important as conversion. And so in order to do that, one strengthens the other. And so the more deposits you put in, the more equity you gain when you have to kind of tap that audience and say, hey, girl, I need you to buy. You can do that. And there's reciprocity in the relationship because you put the deposits in.
Exactly. And I think part of the deposit is, one of the things that we talk about and what we represent at Group Black is that deposit is also investing in the community. It's investing in the community in multiple ways, including who are the storytellers of the community, who is representing the community more broadly. Can you touch on, Danielle, a little bit of the work that you've seen, whether it's at Kraft or maybe other sort of companies that you've seen have done this really well?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many examples now, and what I like to look at is kind of who has been there, right? Because we can talk about a post-2020 era of investment in storytellers, and I like to look at kind of who's continued to keep their foot on the gas and built with these partners. And then I think the world of storytellers and media environments has grown so much that it's really exciting for a marketer because our access to storytellers is so, the degrees of separation are so much tighter than what they used to be. And so I would say right now, I would think, and this is interesting, Walmart, my background is from Target, but I think the work that Walmart is doing right now is really interesting. Their just recent Black and Unlimited Dad superhero campaign was really brilliant. I also think what McDonald's is doing, obviously, McDonald's and Nike are kind of, the goats in this, and so I think the work that McDonald's is doing right now, particularly with AI, understanding that, over half of people are more concerned about AI than excited, to be able to introduce AI to audiences by recreating messages to your grandmother in different voices, taps on both inclusivity in a way that's really important, but also gets people familiar with a robot. So I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, awesome. We get this question, and we're not an agency, we're a media company, but when we present to brands, one of the questions we always get is like, but how do I do it authentically? How do we execute against culture? How do I do it right? And Ryan and Greg, you all as agencies are almost like the Rosetta Stone translating for brands. I'm curious, could you talk about what are the roadblocks that you hear brands, when you are working with them, bring up when it comes to investing in and activating against these communities? How do you what it is, and how do you help them justify it to their CFO, because that's really who they have to justify it to? Because I think the marketer is mission aligned and understands it, but he still had to get the CFO on board in order to unlock the dollars to do the investment.
Yeah. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. You know what I mean? And I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a brand that does not have good intentions when it comes to talking to millennials, talking to Gen Z, talking to African Americans, Latino, LGBTQIA+, right? And if you want to talk about roadblocks of why those intentions do not actualize, then we need another panel for that, right? I think the key is what I'm seeing is they often feel like they don't have the right to have those types of conversations or interactions And they let that become the excuse as to why they don't do it. Oh, we don't have the right to talk to Latinos. We've never done that before. We don't. How are we going to show up in the black community now? We've never shown up there before. Where there becomes the challenge. And with the work that we're doing with like Kraft Heinz, for instance, a lot of the work happens day to day that's not going to come to life as a commercial or as a social media initiative. It's going to come by transforming internally the organization into a modern organization, where the expectation is that you're talking to all audiences at all times. You're being sustainable, you're being omni-channel, you're providing good value, you're being entertaining, you're being AI optimized, all at the same damn time, as Future says, right? So a lot of the roadblocks happen because you don't necessarily at all these places have people like Danielle who are committed to, we're going to change this organization internally, and then the output will come naturally, right? They're doing so much output all the time, iterative digital campaigns, billboards, radio, they're doing that all the time. But if you don't have a baseline nomenclature and value system for how you're talking about culture or understanding culture, then it's not going to matter. It's not going to impact culture. It's damn sure not going to push it forward.
So I think there are two things we have to contend with. The first is most clients don't understand the audience. That's a big issue, right? So I don't have a right to succeed, right? And Bronnen brought this up earlier. If you look back to how soap operas were created, no one understood anything. They just said as brands will invest, right? Millions of dollars. In fact, if you don't know this, General Hospital just struck its 50th anniversary. 50 years of that same story based on P&G deciding that made sense, right? So we don't understand the audience, which means we don't have enough intelligent data. That's our biggest issue, right? The biggest issue is our clients don't understand the intelligence of the data. The second is they actually struggle with evaluation of how the prize or how big the prize can be, right? So they're afraid because I don't know enough, and by the way, is it worth my time? The good news is that these audiences now represent the only thing that remains for growth, right? That's why, Danielle talked about them being growth audiences, because she's dealing with that conversation on a daily basis. But for me, the biggest roadblock has been a lack of intelligence about the audience. Secondly, and the biggest is a fear of actually committing. And that fear is a huge driver.
And I think the thing that was just said, the fear is important, but also it's the fear of what Ryan said. It requires a transformation. And when a brand hears that, that feels heavy, right? That's a lot of work. That's a lot of work I got to do, and I don't really know if it's going to work. And that's my, excuse my French, that's my ass on the line. So is there a crawl, walk, run when you talk about investing in culture? Is there a starting point that can deliver meaningful results that can then give credibility and some firepower to those brand managers to say, okay, I could go take step 2 and then step 5?
I can jump in. I think, so when I started this role, it was really important, and Ryan knows this, I've said, I don't want to just do inclusive marketing. I've done that. I got a shirt. We've been through the trenches. We've been a party of one. I want to create inclusive marketers. And so creating inclusive marketers starts with all the things, to Ryan's point, that you see before an ad hits the air. It is defining success along the route to get there, so that we're creating a team of evangelists within the company that will go out and preach the gospel of why this is important. And so that's the crawl, walk, run in my world really starts with acumen, understanding cultural comprehension, not just cultural awareness, because I think we have a group of marketers who are really, really good at tapping in and finding moments in culture, but not taking that into context in order to comprehend it. And then it kind of transitions into growth, into this space of psychological safety, to be able to ask the questions, phoning a friend, understanding when to use AI and when to pick up the phone and call someone or do both. And then redefining what excellence looks like. So showing that excellence is not just garnered by, we love this environment, but not just this environment, but there are plenty of places, including the culture itself, that will speak directly back to you to tell you if you're winning or not.
So one of the things that we've done to build on that is that we, to think about what I'm getting ready to say. Traditionally, we know Black History Month, Hispanic Heritage Month, AAPI, LGBTQ+ month. These things are all evident, right? And what we've said to our clients that has kind of transformed this learning is we've said, for instance, with Black history, that Black history is American history. So it's a different conversation, right? So I'm not coming to a client and just simply talking about the Black History program. It's what is American history and what role do Black people play in that? Hispanic History Month, those kind of things. And helping change that narrative is important because now we cultivate that and we say to our clients, that's American culture. And so to understand American culture, you have to understand where it comes from and the people who create it. Clients tend to really get that pretty quickly because marketers are intuitively smart to figure that part out. What they have not figured out is how to measure for success yet, and that's sort of the next horizon.
And can you touch on that? Is that the opportunity when you look at where does the innovation needs to be in this space and folks who are practitioners? Is it about how do we measure it, improve it, and is that where AI or maybe something else? Because AI is not the only technological innovation that's happening. Hyper-personalization is incredibly important right now. Where do you see us being, how do we get across that chasm of measurement and being able to improve it? What are some of the things that you all are doing?
So one of the things we did about 5 years ago, we started out with the Uniculture Intelligence Network, right? So we now have the largest ethnically validated database in the world, right? We have, in the United States, we have close to 300 million, 165 million ethnic data points and 300 million data points in totality, right? And what it tells us is the conversational ethnicity differently now, right? Now, what's important is setting those criteria up front because they don't exist. And let's tell you something else we have to consider. For most of the things you just mentioned, most companies have no measure against growth audiences against those programs. So they can't tell you today. They can tell you how to go make a return on investment for every other group except the growth audiences. So the first step is to inform it with data, right? That's really important. Here's the data. Here's the real size of the prize. Here's the real opportunity. Here's where they are, and here's what's important. But more importantly, it then is important to work with the client or work in the organization to make sure there are measurement goals. Because the difference between DE&I now has become the fact that DE&I never was related to business. Now, that's not a bad thing. That doesn't mean for DEI people, I'm not offending you. I'm just simply saying the challenge has become no one ever told you you had to sell something, right? We have a thing at Uniworld that's really funny. One of our, and forgive my language, is we sell shit. We make that very clear. Clients need to know that. Now, if you start to think about what's happening relative to data and where we're going, everything needs to be measured back against selling something. Or selling, now, the something we may sell, to Danielle's point, might be empathy. It might be love. It might be an understanding. That might be part of our criteria, but some unit somewhere has to leave somebody's shelf. And so in doing that, it's about being data informed. It's about executing against that and building out infrastructure that supports that, because without it, it's not sustainable.
Got it. No, we're at time, but I do want to ask one last question of each member of the panel. One thing about our culture is we tend to, want to be humble and just do the work. And I think we need to swag more. I think we need to talk about our wins more. And so I would love if each of you could just talk about one specific win or example of how culture was a superpower that your organization delivered, so people can have a tangible example. Because I want the marketers in the room to be able to say, hey, you know what? This is what Kraft did. And I want the agencies in the room to say, hey, you know what? This is what UWG or Cashmere did. And I want anyone in the other side of the ecosystem to say, here's what we deliver, and this is the win. So if y'all could just take a moment and think of one thing, and Greg, I'll start with you, and just share it with our audience, and then we'll close out.
So really quickly, a couple of years ago, our client, Ford Motor Company, came to us and said, we want to sell SUVs to black women. Now, most black women know they already want an SUV, right? But we were going to sell a SUV called Bronco Sport, so a whole different category, right? And the big data information was that at the same time they were making this request, black women were saying, I own more of myself than ever before. And we've already embraced that, right? At Uniworld, we talk about the vanguard of black feminism, right? And so it became important to make the client understand that black women were transforming. And how they were transforming was they were no longer stereotyped by not getting their hair wet. Now, I know that sounds really simple because every black woman out here is thinking,
see all these braids out here?
Right. And so the conversation was, black women don't do things. They don't bike, they don't run, and they don't hike, and they don't camp. And they do. And we took that information and created a campaign called We Do. And it showed black women doing all these things, running, biking, and hiking, and telling you we do. It went on to win a Silver Ogilvy Award last year, as one of the best integrated marketing campaigns in that client's history, because black women do.
All right. And sold a lot of edge control, I'm sure.
I think, at Cashmere, it's been an interesting and long journey for us. We came out of music culture, came out of hip hop music, the Source magazine, artist management, making MySpace pages for Fat Joe and Raekwon. We came out of that, right? So for us to be able to still be here, call it 15, 20 years later, but working with the C-suites at Fortune 500 companies to help them understand the impact of culture, the impact of all audiences, like Greg said, not just on some altruistic shit, but on some growth stuff. This is how you make money. This is how you get the bag, right? So a couple of years ago, we still continue to do commercials and social campaigns and pop-up shops and all of that. But we understood that a big portion of our value to our clients was understanding the culture, and we created something, Culture Agency of Record, right? And we built that relationship first and most highly publicized with Taco Bell, with Marriott, obviously with Kraft Heinz. And it's enabled us to have a deeper conversation through the business transformation. Not to be like, here's our campaign, make this work for black people. Here's our campaign, translate this, make it work for Latinos. Instead, we've helped build the KPIs, build the scorecards, understand the culture at all levels, and build a cultural strategy that everybody in the IAT, meaning the PR agency over there, the experiential agency, the media buy agency, to help them understand what the goal is and to build the framework of how we're going to talk about that consistently. Not on some TED Talk shit where you say some stuff. Hello?
There you go.
Not on some TED Talk shit where you say some stuff and keep it moving, but what's the tailwind of that? How do you continue to impact, right? And again, it results in award-winning work. Hopefully we'll win a couple here, right? But most importantly, it helps me sleep at night to know that some of these big organizations are going through the process of transformation. And the next agency that works with them, the next person of color, the next culturally nuanced person they have internally is gonna have an easier job impacting and being a part of the culture that they love so much while at work. How about that?
So I'll say two things. So one, being relatively new to Kraft Heinz, what was important for me when we started was to say, a campaign is not a win for us today. A campaign out the door, for the sake of a campaign out the door, is not a win. What a win is all the things we don't see, all the things we caught from going out the door that was culturally irrelevant. So those are the wins that we stack up every day in creating a culture of inclusive marketers who are at the forefront of culture and not just moving at the speed of culture, but moving with cultural comprehension. And so that, to me, is the work that we do really every day with the Cashmere team that I'm really proud of. I wouldn't say history. When I thought about this question about cultural superpower, I loved the program I did with Target with Versus. Because when Versus came out, everyone wanted like, oh my God, this yummy thing is happening online, and what do we do? And again, to your, Ryan's earlier point, it's like, oh, can we go there? Can we go there? Do we have the right to talk there? And the short answer is no, because sometimes my business ain't your business. And we had to recognize that. And so what was important for us at that moment is to realize where we had the entry points. And the deposits that we had put into culture allowed us to partner with McBride Sisters Wine to be able to usher us into culture in a place that was naturally organic for us to be there. And so when we had, Verses featuring D'Angelo and friends, and McBride Sisters is beautifully on display, it was not about us playing quarterback in that moment. It was about us amplifying what was already inherent to culture. And in turn, the shout out of, I go buy my McBride Sisters, I pick you up every day at your job from Target. Shout out D'Angelo for that line. That chatter on social was bigger for us in Black Beyond Measure chatter than it was the entire year in that one evening. And that was really just from not playing quarterback and having it, have to be a logo fest for us. And so it's redefining what that success looks like. I'm from LA, and I always say success is when I go into my cousin's barbershop in Compton and he says, I see that little thing you was doing with that little thing. And I'm like, yes. Reaching those corners of culture that we don't typically reach.
Awesome. Well, please join me in giving a round of applause to our panelists. Thank you so much, Danielle, Ryan. Greg, we're so happy to have you here. And I think you had the line of the day. And brands, remember, you got to make deposits before you can make withdrawals. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you.